All right, guys. Well, this is my first time doing this lecture, my greatest losses. And I think initially when I saw that I was going to be doing this class, I was kind of excited because I thought it should be very easy to find a number of games which I've lost. I'm very good at that. But then I actually realized it's quite difficult because the class is not called my losses, it's called my greatest losses, and none of my losses are very impressive. It's nice when you go down in style. Go down fighting so that your game may be candidate for an exciting lecture like this. But I haven't played too many of those, which actually made it easier to find one. So in the end, it was very easy. This is a game I played against Ganguly, Surya Shekhar Ganguly from India. He's a Grandmaster. He has been for quite some time. He's usually found above 2600 and definitely does some work with the very elite players in India. So he's not only very well prepared just as a chess player himself, but when you do a lot of work for other strong players, you usually have to be better prepared than just for your own games. Sometimes you're more polite when you go to your friend's house than you are to your own parents. So when you're helping out someone else, you got to make sure your tactics and your theory and your recommendations are airtight, because it's your skin, your neck on the line there. So I was really excited for this game. I had never played him at the time. This was in 2015. So also in 2015, I was still an international master. And this was played in the Edmonton International. That's in Canada. It was a norm tournament, closed tournament, so there were some invited foreign players, and Ganguly was one of them. So I had the white pieces, and the game started d4, d5, and at the time, my horrible addiction to the London system had not yet festered, so I played c4. And this was pretty standard for me at the time, and even now I've always been a d4 player. Ever since I've been a decent player. I think I started with e4, but quickly switched over, and the Queen's Gambit is something that I have really played for quite some time, but the line that my opponent chose to play against me is actually kind of a unique one. And sure, we all know about d takes c4. I mean, at the end of the day, the Queen's Gambit accepted is one of the most basic variations. You're going to offer me a pawn, I'm going to take it. But after the move e4, gaining space in the center, you don't often see black play in a way where he can successfully just take your pawn on the second move of the game and then hang on to it. There's not many variations where black can play d takes c4, b5, and find a way to keep his pawn. So this game was actually an example of my opponent trying to do that and using a line which he definitely had prepared, not necessarily for this game, but had prepared in general. And that line is after a4. Okay, if black plays b takes a4, I think it's clear that all these pawns are eventually going to fall, and white is going to be the one with the center completely under his control. So it makes sense that my opponent would play c6 and not a6, dropping the pawn because of this pin. But although that might seem completely obvious, actually it's exactly what happened. The line continues here, c6, and okay, if I put more pressure on the pawn with knight c3, if you play a6, technically there should be the exact same reaction. Pawn takes, c takes b5, and knight takes b5, because, this is elementary tactics. Knight takes b5, rook takes a8, and I'm winning. And then my opponent just took my knight. It was kind of a shock. A takes b5. So this is a line, and it is a line. My opponent wasn't just going crazy at the board, but this is actually a variation, a theoretical one at that, where black voluntarily gives away the rook on a8, and he says, okay, the resulting position is actually just going to be an entire rook for an entire piece, just a whole exchange up for white. No pawns, no gimmicks, nothing. He's just saying that there's a very specific way, and you'll see in the game how black can sort of attack white's center. And if white just plays these normal logical moves, which I thought I was playing, it's actually quite easy to get in trouble. So rook takes a8, of course. I just lost the knight. Bishop b7 with tempo. hitting the rook and also this pawn on e4. And black's not really actually intending to take it. So if I move my rook anywhere, let's say rook a1, black's not necessarily going to play the move bishop takes e4 here. He could, but not usually. The main reason is that if you get a little greedy and take here, first of all, the move b3 comes into consideration, because if you take it, then I take on b5, and we already sort of wish here that we maybe had some more space for our king or some more pieces developed, and black is already kind of, I mean, I'm going to take on b3 next, and you don't really want to play this. But bishop takes e4 makes the most sense. Why is it not played? Well, black favors the move e6, so that the king has more room, so that black can play bishop b4 check next turn and get the pieces out very quickly. What black wants to do is develop with tempo, develop quickly, and eventually say that he can attack the center with maybe his pieces, maybe his pawns. And I think in this game you'll see kind of the natural way, or the most concrete way to attack white's center. Knight e2. Now, knight e2 is an interesting move, right? Giving away this pawn. And this is actually, these are some games that I wanted to just mention, is that these aren't my games, but these are ones to be aware of if you're playing this position. As we can see, the types of positions you get are very unorthodox. It's like, what's going on here? Black's taking that center pawn, white's voluntarily giving it up and saying, okay, finally I get to get castled. Play king h1 maybe, play d5. At the end of the day, we are up that exchange, but we had to give a pawn back for it. Now, what would most of us play is most of us would probably play the move f3, because it's the most solid way to defend the e4 pawn. First of all, it keeps the e4 pawn. I mean, it's kind of crazy to play this position and just give up your one center pawn for nothing, seemingly. So knight e2 may be a good move, but not the most natural. I mean, f3 is clearly the most natural. So after f3, we see that there may be a few reasons down the line why white might want his rook on a1, and white may want his rook on a2. Now, I had actually seen that there was a good chance that he plays this line. So before the game, I had checked out rook a1, I checked out rook a2, and I decided that I would play rook a2 instead of rook a1, with the idea that later on I'm going to play this move b2, b3, and this rook might be useful along the second rank. Can enter the position without, let's say, having to move my bishop on c1. If my rook was on a1, maybe I'd have to develop all my pieces to use my rook. But here, I thought, well, I'm a genius. I'll play b3, swing the rook along the second rank, and get it into the action. So this is my game, not rook a1, but rook a2. You'll notice that the resulting moves are kind of similar. Black still wants to play e6, and similarly, knight e2 is a very decent move for white. But again, I was playing the most natural way. I saw f3. And of course, it's the easiest way to defend the center. And the issue that I have with this position is that when you look at it with the engine says that white is doing fantastic, like really well, almost like +1 or something. And +1 almost makes sense, because technically the material imbalance is a rook for a minor piece. It's a rook for a knight here. But it's +1. So I just looked at +1. I think I played a few more moves when I was preparing, and I said, okay, he's not going to play this because it's +1. I mean, he's not going to play into a position where the evaluation's not so good. But actually, where I thought the variation ended, right here, is probably where the variation begins. So I thought, oh, I play f3, that's the end of the line, +1, I'm up a clear exchange, just get developed and castle, easy. Wasn't the case at all. Actually, there's been a lot of games, and they often start from this position right here. And black scores really well, despite the evaluation. That was something I had not looked at. So had I really prepared properly, I should have looked a little further, should have maybe looked at the games that were played there. I didn't do that. I just sort of checked the engine evaluation, and I saw this rook a2 might be more useful than rook a1, which most people were playing. And so I just said, okay, if he plays this line, I'll do this. turned out he did play this line, and I wasn't really prepared for what was going to come next. After f3, he played knight c6, and again, I almost look at this position and think, my moves are all very natural. How can they be wrong? Knight e2. Can't go wrong with knight e2. Getting my knight developed, guarding the pawn in the center. My next move is probably going to be this bishop out to e3, and maybe queen d2, knight c3. I thought, wow, this just looks great. And my opponent was kind of unfazed. Bishop b4 check. He's playing very quickly. And it was a little bizarre to me because I kept looking at my position like, what am I missing? What am I missing? But it's just so solid. There can't be anything wrong with it. Bishop d2, knight g7. Now, knight g7 kind of caught me by surprise again, because I thought, okay, it's also possible I could take this bishop and play rook a3. And while he might have knight d3, I'm going to take that. And because I was up in exchange, if I give back the exchange and win a pawn for it, I thought this should be good for me again. But I'm still a little bit away from castling here. And it's also absolutely not clear that black's going to play knight d3. In fact, I don't think he is. But I didn't end up doing that. I ended up playing this move, b3, mostly because I wanted to make use of my rook on a2. And I thought, well, if I play b3, if black takes, then it's always easy for me to play queen takes. And what a genius I am with this bishop on b4, taking on d2, because look, my rook on a2, I mean, I actually look like one of the smartest guys ever. Rook on a2 instead of on a1. Now I get to play rook on a2 takes d2, guarding my d pawn at the same time. So I thought, okay, probably I thought that I would be giving this class maybe in a different lecture, like Most Brilliant Wins or something, at the time when I thought about this. But luckily it was good lecture material anyway. So didn't happen, but of course that's one of the main calculations. And I thought when I played rook a2 initially that this is exactly how I want to do it. I want to play b3, use my rook on the second rank, and so that's why I played b3 instead of taking on b4 and going for those other lines. I also wanted to undermine these pawns, as it's pretty clear as soon as this knight moves that the bishop on f1, taking on f5 is going to be very good. So b3 was played, castles, and it's definitely in my favor to play b takes c4, so I did. Takes. And in this position, I certainly have some options. I mean, again, I could take this bishop on b4 and sacrifice my rook back, as I demonstrated. But I was a little concerned about, ideas like, let's say, even this, something like f5, knight c6. And I thought that with the knight coming to c6 and my e4 pawn under attack, it's hard for me to maintain my d4 pawn and my e4 pawn. And even a position like this, I thought it's a little bit uncomfortable maybe, because that rook stops me from castling, and there's not many chess positions where like the entire queen side just disappears from the board. But that's what we have here. And I thought it'd be too hard to maintain my pawns in the center. Knight c6 is always an idea. And after knight c6, there's also queen coming out to h4. And I simply didn't want to allow any of this stuff. So I didn't. I decided not to go for that. And the other main move I considered here was bishop to c3. But after takes, knight takes d4, although I get to play this rook d2 move, black plays knight c6. And what's most annoying here is the queen comes out to b6. Why is that so frustrating is I don't have a dark square bishop anymore, and if I ever castle, it's just going to be sitting on the worst square for knight takes f3, any discovered check. So it sort of means that after queen b6, I just can't castle, and that's very frustrating. Once I've played pawn to f3, if I don't have a dark square bishop, I don't have control over that diagonal, not being able to castle is one of the worst feelings ever, especially because I don't even have a queenside rook. So I can't even dream of castling the other way. I've got a rook on d2, right? What was I thinking? Rook a2, d2. Anyways, so there's an example where I thought the rook would be useful on d2, but actually it means I can't castle and it's kind of uncomfortable. So I didn't play that. Instead, I played queen b1. And I thought, okay, I'm going to attack his bishop, and I would love if he did this. Because really, when you play a move like rook a2, you want to put it to use. Otherwise, you look like you don't know what you're doing. So I was really trying to move it horizontally so that I looked good, because there are a lot of people spectating my game, and I felt uncomfortable with my rook on a2, and being down a lot of time on the clock. It's just embarrassing, So bishop takes d2, rook takes d2, and now it's totally different. This would be great for me. Now my rook is protecting the d4 pawn. The bishop is hanging on b7. So I was trying to encourage this. It didn't quite work because I think I sort of underestimated his next move, which was queen b6. I thought there's no way that he would make a move like this because of rook b2. I thought that would be so strange if he played queen b6 and allowed rook b2. And then I realized sort of what he was intending here. After rook b2, this gets out of the pin because then I'm threatening the king with check. And the problem is I don't have time for rook b7 after this because, well, black can choose a number of moves. But after king takes d2, we can just follow up with either queen a5 or c3 check. c3 check is much stronger. If I take with the, let's say, the knight, then the real issue is that after queen d4, bishop d3, knight e5, I'm not actually doing anything here. In fact, I may be getting seriously attacked. Like, for example, rook takes b7. If knight c4 check, and I play king c2, then there's knight a3, just winning. If king e2, again, there's queen e3, for example, and knight d2. And so, of course, you start calculating all these variations. You realize that there's ways to lose in almost every position here. And the more brave, king takes c3. I mean, I felt like if I had to play this move, it's probably suspicious. But queen a5, king d3, all with tempo, bishop a6, king e3. And again, after I take queen c3, I lose my pawn on d4. And despite being up in exchange, I have to put my king on g3. I mean, this is no fun. I thought in this position, black could play a move like f5, and I would be pretty scared of losing here. f4 check is a threat. Opening up the rook is just very strong, and I'm still playing the game mostly without my h1 rook. It's not really contributing. So I was really scared of positions like this, and I only realized that sort of after calculating and realizing that he has this nice move, pawn to c3. Initially, I was counting on rook b2, but instead, I settled on bishop takes b4, not the move I initially wanted to play. So bishop takes b4, knight takes, and now he's very clearly threatening knight to d3 check, and that move is going to win my queen at the moment because it's unprotected, so I played knight to c3. So I thought, okay, this is good. If queen takes here, I take on b4. I defend my knight, I win a knight, I'm attacking the bishop and the knight. It's a great move. But he's not going to play that, of course. After knight c3, he just played knight c6, which is a nice move because he strengthens his support of b4, protects his own knight, and the d4 pawn is now hit by the knight and the queen. So I played rook d2 because we're on move 18 and I hadn't touched it since I played rook a2. So at this point it was a little too much. I just had to move it. It also helped that it was being attacked, although that doesn't mean that I needed to move it necessarily because I did have a pin. The reason that I moved it is because the pawn on d4 is hanging, and well, I just moved my knight from e2 to defend it, and now I don't have a good way to support it. So I think it was around here where I started realizing that my position is actually just very bad. It started off so good, but now I'm really missing my dark square bishop. If I had a dark square bishop sitting on e3, everything would be okay. Everything. I could play king f2 safely. I could play d5. I'd have d5 threats. I would just be covering everything, protecting my d pawn. It means it's harder for him to ever play knight takes d4 because he'd be walking into a pin from my bishop. But without that bishop, as I've been saying, the queen on b6 is so powerful at preventing me from castling. So even if I play bishop e2, even if I castle, there's always going to be this pin and that free pawn on d4, which is getting harder and harder to protect. What I didn't realize was that without the dark square bishop on e3, my knight pretty much has to stay on e2 to protect d4. And if my knight stays on e2, well, then my bishop stays on f1. And then my king stays on e1. So everyone boxes in something else, and then none of my pieces get developed. So I played rook d2, and I realized that I didn't really have a solution here. Because in the long term, if I ever castle, he can always play knight takes d4. He played rook a8, and at this point, he was playing pretty confidently because I think he realized if white can't castle, then white is probably worse. If my king has to stay in the middle or face this attack at all, then I think it's really uncomfortable here. Knight d3 has not been working for the last couple moves. First of all, the knight on c3 is covering my queen, so it's not a move that wins material. But also, after bishop takes d3, for example, my bishop also protects my queen, and there's a number of reasons it doesn't work. But it's something I have to always watch out for if I'm going to leave my king in the middle. So I played bishop e2 because, simply, I just have to get developed. I can't wait. It's move 19, and that's the first time I moved my light square bishop in the whole game. Rook a3. He's hitting the knight. Once again, preparing for these ideas, like rook b3 is a threat. Kicking my queen out. Rook takes c3 is obviously a threat, winning a knight. And if I move my knight, there's ideas like c3 and pushing that pawn up the board. Bishop takes c4 in this position was, another move that I thought that I could count on. But again, I don't really trust the position too much after, well, let's say in a position like this. If knight takes d4, this is another calculation I would have to have. Rook takes, and then here, if queen takes, I have to figure out exactly what's happening in this position because I'm down a piece, but let's say a move like bishop a6 might nearly win my bishop back because I am in a pin here. And, of course, moves like rook a1 are just extremely, extremely scary to face. So I thought no matter what, I'm really risking it big time with bishop takes c4. And I decided to just play bishop e2. And after rook a3, queen c1 with the idea to defend my knight. And, well, I wish I had more ideas than that because I'm not castling here. The queen on b6 prevents me from castling. So at this point, I think I knew I was maybe clearly worse or maybe even losing. But it's kind of miraculous how black turned a position where he's down like a clear exchange into a position where I sort of traded bishops, dark square bishops without thinking, and now I can't castle, I can't ever get my other rook out, and it's just a very uncomfortable position. As you can see in the game, I never castled. I never got around to it. Knight takes d4. Finally, it's time to cash that in. Bishop d1. There were a lot of threats in the position, but here, if black played the move knight d3 check, then I would just take it, and this rook is hanging. So queen c1, the reason I had to play bishop d1 was because knight c2 is in the air, so that's not a free rook. Something like this, and what's the other unfortunate thing is that after king d1, rook d8 mate is even covered. So nothing else for me there. Nothing going in my favor. But when the position is as tactical as this and your king's stuck in the middle, you're sort of weak on the dark squares, generally the tactics are going to favor the guy who's putting the pressure on. And in that position, that is most definitely my opponent. So rook on a3 is not hanging, which means bishop d1 was played, rook a8, covering his last rank, also just getting the rook out of there. Now knight d3 is a big threat. Now I played knight a4, trying to keep the initiative, quote unquote. Of course, I'm not doing anything with my initiative here. It's all black. Rook takes a4 is the move that was played in the game, and the idea is that he just has a really nice sort of tactical shot here. But again, it's unsurprising that the guy who's been putting on the pressure the entire game has the tactics. I mean, you can't expect to sit here and play white's position and then expect the tactics to just work out for you. I mean, white's position is almost all his pieces are misplaced. And this is nice. I can speak about white's position almost like a third person, as if it's not my game. Like, white's position is so bad here. I mean, you should never play like this. This is ridiculous. And then, of course, I've got my name right up there at the top saying that actually it belongs to me. That's kind of embarrassing. So knight a4, rook takes a4. And I didn't see this in the game, but again, my moves are kind of forced. I have to play bishop takes, and he sort of uncorks this really nice combo. He plays knight takes f3 check. And I thought at this point, I said, well, I'm either going to lose a really kind of pretty game, or, you know, he's not going to have enough material to checkmate me, because he's running out. I mean, he's only got a queen, a knight, and a bishop after I play pawn takes. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm up so much material here that even though he takes a lot of it back, maybe he can't take all of it back. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Queen e3 check. Annoying move. I've only got a couple options here because rook e2 drops my queen. King d1 is not the move I played in the game. It's the other option. Queen f3 check. And the reason that I wasn't really playing it is because after queen f3, rook e2, first of all, queen takes h1 is with check, and then maybe queen takes queen is close to a good, very, very good position, but he's got even better. He's got knight d3 here, and, well, now, if I play, let's say, queen takes c4, knight b2, my rook's pinned. So I lose my whole queen here, and it means in this position, white actually has to play a different move, let's say queen c3, but if you can't take that pawn on c4 and free your pieces, then, okay, in this position, basically, black has brought the material back to 3 pawns plus a knight for a rook. And on top of those 3 pawns, he's also got nearly a checkmating attack. So this would be pretty bad for me. I decided to play king f1 because it's the move that appears to keep my material. Because after queen takes f3, I could play king g1. So I think it's logical I played king f1 as opposed to the other one because, you know, at least he still has to prove something here. He has to checkmate me. Unfortunately, he was up to the task. So queen e3, king f1, queen f3, king g1. These moves were just played based on the time situation. So he just shuffled a little bit, and then he made his next intended move. But okay, we were both getting a little low on time, and he thought, as is a good strategy in chess, to just repeat and gain a few moves towards move 40. So knight d3, this is the move that he came up with, and it's unfortunate, but there's no real trickery with queen takes c4, because not only is queen e1 just check and then take with check, but even if it was white's turn, there's no queen c8 mate. So I'm not threatening anything here. So on top of not threatening anything, I'm also hanging like every single piece I own. So I decided to play h4, kind of a creative move. If I play h4, you understand my idea is that this queen is off limits because of checkmate. This is not the kind of tactic that you can expect to work at this stage in the game, but I had my hopes. Knight d3, h4. Other moves than h4, I would just have to move my queen. Let's say queen, maybe d1 is another move. And if we calculate here where my king is going to go, it doesn't have many places to go after queen f4. So here, if king e2, then we have a checkmate. If king g2, then unfortunately for me, that bishop that has been back there joins the attack for the first time in the game. And basically, this was a position I was quite sure was leading to checkmate. Okay, king h3. The problem is that the rooks are hanging in this position that if black wants to, he can sort of play materially. But during the game, I was just quite convinced that something like this would lead to mate. Queen takes e4 is also possible here. Queen takes e4, h1 is hanging. Because, I mean, even a position like this, for example, king g3, let's say even this, we have to remember that black is... how many pawns did he just take? He's got 4 pawns plus the knight here. So it's probably winning anyway. But again, I'm sure there's a checkmate there as well that with just a little bit of thought, it's very easy to find. So I decided to play h4. Queen f4 check, king g1, queen e3 check, king f1. Again, my opponent wasting a few moves to get to move 40, just in case he would need them. This game didn't actually even make it that long. c3, very nice move. Why does c3 just work? Well, the issue is that if queen takes c3, queen e1, king g2, and again, the bishop joins the attack, which you get that feeling that the queen and the knight are basically dominating 2 rooks and my queen. As soon as he just throws one more piece into the attack, I don't have any answers. If my king goes to h1 or h3 here, or sorry, h2 or h3 here, black is going to take one of these things and then probably take the other. So something like this. Already, I could basically just rule this out. Queen g1 check. And the king doesn't have many places to go. There's no rook g2. King h3. Let's say bishop f5, knight f4. I mean, you guys pick whichever mate you like. So that position looked hopeless. So I have to leave my queen on c1, but at the same time, my rook is attacked. And if I move my rook somewhere, then my queen is hanging, because my queen is only not hanging because of this checkmate idea. So if I go and play like rook here, well, that just doesn't work. I'll just take a free queen. So I played rook h to h2. If he takes my rook, I'm hoping to take back. But I mean, he's ruthless. He's way too accurate for me. He plays the move bishop a6. And I mean, at some point I was like, well, aren't you a little concerned there, Mr. Ganguly, about not taking all your material back? You know, if you do a count, it can be a little intimidating. I've got 2 rooks for a knight. But no, he's pretty cold-blooded. Played bishop a6, and he's saying once again that if queen takes on c3, that black will play, let's say, what would we play after queen c3? Probably some discovered check here. You have to remember the king doesn't have anywhere to go. So if I play knight f4, my king is actually stuck. It doesn't have anywhere to move, which means that I need to block this check with my pieces, and unfortunately, these are the worst set of pieces that could ever possibly be arranged to block this check. Bishop b5, nope. I mean, I have to play like rook here, takes, and at the end of the day, it's just mate. Completely winning. So I just can't block this check. That's the worst part. I just can't block the check. So I can't take it. Well, if I can't take it, I've got to deal with this discovered check. Again, I can't block it. So rook h to e2. And I mean, when you got guys playing queen takes e2 check against you, it really starts to get embarrassing. At this point, there's people coming to the board. They're all looking. My rook on d2, that was the same one that started on a2, so at least it made it to the end of the game. But queen takes e2, I mean, I follow up with rook takes e2, knight takes c1, and I lose my rook. I follow up with king takes e2. Well, not really any different. Takes, that's check as well. Then the rook falls. So, I mean, it's just over. So he played queen takes e2, and I just resigned after queen takes because, quite honestly, I had had enough. I mean, that was a pretty brutal game. He played queen e2. And he won the game after what I would say was kind of lazy preparation on my part, because I looked a little bit at the engine eval and sort of comforted myself that white was doing well. But there are some games there, and there were some games before I had played him of other strong players, like even Nakamura, who tries this line from time to time. And it does trend in black's direction, not the whole line, but the way that I played with f3. This greedy move early on to try to keep the pawn in the center and just have a solid structure. In the end, black does well in a lot of those positions because despite the computer evaluation, it's just a really comfy position with easy plans. And that's exactly what my opponent did here. He was completely familiar with what to do. I wasn't, so I was using a lot of time, and I also didn't play very convincingly here, as I probably made some cardinal mistakes, like don't give away the dark square bishop in this line, all these things that I basically wasn't prepared to handle because I just sort of checked the evaluation on the computer and rationalized that this would be safe to play. But clearly he had prepared this either for himself or for another player, and he was super well prepared against me, and it showed. I mean, I got kind of destroyed. It ended up being 34 moves, but it felt like I was getting pushed around for the whole game. So I guess this kind of qualifies as one of my greatest losses, because I was impressed by the game as it was happening to me. This knight takes f3 that he had, and then this queen sack at the end, and just the comfort level being like down so much material, but still not trying to just win it back. He's playing for the compensation. He's playing to checkmate my king. He's not worried about getting his pieces back. You can see he cashed in big time right at the end of the game. Then he got everything back at once. So that was probably the correct way to play. And yeah, he just launched a really successful attack. So he kind of crushed me here. And he also crushed my hopes at a GM norm, which was in that tournament. I was an international master at the time, back in 2015. Yeah, so this was a tough loss of mine against Ganguly, who is still a strong player to this day. I have another game which is kind of like a bonus greatest loss, because while this game is my greatest loss in the sense that I thought it was a beautiful game by my opponent and it was really unexpected to me the whole time, the other game that I have prepared is without question it's my worst loss. As in, it felt the worst. I mean, when you lose like this, it doesn't actually feel that bad. The guy played a really good game. It was quite impressive, and he kind of deserved it. The other game that I prepared, it's really tough to take. This loss was probably where I was, let's say, the most upset after the game, or one of the worst ways to lose. And hopefully I'll show you what I mean. So this game, was played at a Canadian Open in Canada. There we go. And it was played against a guy named Nikolay Noritsyn. And Nikolay, for those that don't know him, was involved in a very funny scandal in chess, where he was playing for the Canadian Championship very recently, and his opponent was like hiding the queen that he needed to promote, and he couldn't find his queen, and so he promoted to an upside down rook, and then that's an illegal move, and so it doesn't count as a queen, it counted as a rook, and then he ended up losing the game. So he was part of a very funny controversy recently, a very unfortunate one, as the playoff that game happened in was a qualifier for the World Cup. So he ended up losing his spot for that. But this is way before that. This is in 2011. So where was I in 2011? I was FM. So I had made FM in 2009, and this was just a local tournament in Canada, but it's the Canadian Open, and it used to be a lot stronger back then. So I don't want to focus too much on the game, but I did want to just run through it quickly from the start to really give you an idea of why this is, let's say, a loss that still haunts me to this day, because it doesn't really do it justice to just show the final position. So we'll go through it a little quickly here, but essentially we got a Benoni style position. King's Indian, but it's probably going to go in the direction of e6 for black. Ideas like e6, ideas like b5, these are all typical Benoni structure ideas. Queen d2, gaining time hitting the pawn on h6, castle, and my opponent plays b5. So he's saying you can have this pawn and I'll take the pawn in the center. I played bishop takes g6, queen takes d5. So technically I won a pawn there, but I did give my opponent the 2 bishops, as well as a very mobile pawn center. If he can play d5, d4, now that's a tough ask because d5, then the c pawn hangs. But if he can play d5, d4, he's in a very good position. I think the light squared bishop is very dangerous on the long diagonal as well. Rook b8, rook a d1. Don't forget that dark square bishop on g7. Very, very good. Hitting the pawn on b2. It can be taken in a lot of lines. So I didn't want him to take my pawn on b2. And he also tried to stop me from taking his pawn on d6. And it came over me that this was a good move to play. Okay, I don't know if that's true. I was an FM at the time. So, thinking like an FM, calculating like an FM, bishop g5. That looks like an FM Aman move. Probably not the same move I'd play today. So what did I want? I wanted two pieces for the rook, but not only did I get a pawn there, I want to say that the pawn on g6 is hanging, and that maybe I have next move something like rook e1, and either rook e7 or rook e8 seemed like I had decent compensation. King h7, rook e1, rook b7 handles both of those moves kind of nicely. And after rook e8, I think I realized in this position that, again, 2 pawns plus a rook for the bishop should probably be totally fine. But what ended up happening was that I think that I just got kind of outplayed by my opponent here. He started to outplay me, and I wanted to get rid of this pawn really badly. The c pawn is hanging, but there's ideas like bishop f8 that I have to watch out for. So I can't just go grab that pawn. h5, g5, and my idea is I finally get this pawn, and I take here. So I thought that I had a good chance to draw, because so far we've liquidated. I'm hoping to get rid of that a pawn, but I'm also thinking in some lines, if the rooks come off the board, that bishop is the wrong color for the a1 square. So this is me thinking pretty far ahead, but I was like, yeah, I probably have good drawing chances, because even if I trade the rooks, it's actually a draw. Rook a2, and I give up the g pawn here in order to basically just walk my king all the way over to this side of the board. And once I do that, my idea is b4, rook a6, something along the lines of those 2 moves, and trade this pawn and get a rook against rook and bishop. Not that that's like a clear draw or anything, but it's probably the best I can do, and it is technically a draw, although in practice, people do lose that endgame a lot. People lose that endgame a lot. Okay, so he tries to keep his pawn, but after a few moves, that b pawn of mine just runs so far up the board that you can see I was able to corral his pawn and take here. So we're going to go to the point where, let's say, he captures the pawn. So move 56, he captures the pawn, because I think at the time I was still writing down moves, so we were playing with increment. And of course, when you see king takes h5, now after this move, which is a capture, we're finally in the end game, where I should probably start counting to 50 for the 50 move rule. And luckily, we were still writing down the moves, so I could just circle the score sheet. It's much easier. Sometimes when you're playing on a DGT board, and let's say you're playing a blitz tournament, and you don't write down the moves, you should always call an arbiter, tell him to start counting for you. Otherwise, there's no proof. But I still had my score sheet. So I circled, nice big circle on move 56, or let's say move 57 as the first move. And we see my attempted defense here, trying to stay on the dark squares. I played rook c8 because I thought, well, if I'm defending this endgame, I may as well try to look nice and cute by doing it. So we'll go set up a little draw trick. You wouldn't believe how quickly he played not that move, but check and king e3. Whenever your opponent sets a trap that kind of looks pretty, usually you want to play really, really fast so that you let him know that you obviously saw that, and like there's no way you ever considered such a bad move. So I think that's what was happening here. I know that's what I do. That's what I do. So we see this this technique. We're right now on move 72, so we're still going along. But I was waiting for my opponent to sort of make some progress, because so far more or less I've kept my king away from the sides of the board, and that's the first step, is to get white's king to the side of the board. So far I was able to do a decent job, but now finally on move 86 I was forced to the side, and we remember that back on move 56 or 57, let's say, that was the big circle. 57 was the first move there. So bishop d3. Now my opponent is trying to do setup there. I mean, at this point we're actually maybe in some sort of position where maybe officially black is winning based on the engine, or officially white is drawing. I didn't really know, but at this point I was just following what seemed logical to me, which was rook c7, dealing with rook check here, and then when I have the option was to just give him checks. And then rook e7 to block the check on this side. So that's sort of what I was going with here as my defense. At the time, I can say I definitely had not looked at this endgame. I mean, you can study this endgame, and in fact you should. But as an FM back in 2011, nope, no chance. I mean, I'm more likely to go memorize some theory, or go study an opening, or learn something else, or go play a sport than study this endgame. Nowadays, I probably wish I did. Otherwise, this game might not be part of this lecture. Rook e7, so I'm always ready to meet rook f1 check with rook e1. And you can see I'm sort of going along, and we've almost had this position before. So I thought, okay, I mean, this is very good. I look at my move, 102. So I'm kind of counting like the moves until the move 50, the 50 move rule. So he plays rook over here, and in this position, I mean, very clearly he's threatening rook down here, checkmate, because the bishop's covering this square. And I felt like I had almost had this position before, but somehow, in fact, I hadn't exactly had it. Not quite. So king e1 just runs into mate. I can't block the mate. I can't stop it. King c1 is actually the only move. And then after rook b6, I was like, wait a minute, now I'm getting mated by force. And the only way to not get mated, of course, is to, give up the rook. Let's say rook takes e4 or rook b8, but no matter what move I make, he's going to, let's say, capture something. So he's going to play king takes e4 or rook takes b8. It doesn't matter, but no matter what, it's a capture. And that gets rid of the 50 move rule, of course. That makes sense. Can't just be hanging my pieces and counting to 50 moves. So I played rook c8 because at this point I saw I was getting mated. But I was like, wow, it's been, how many moves has it been? I mean, I've been here for hours. This was coming up to like almost 8-hour game. It's like 7.5 hours. And I played rook c8, but I didn't hit my clock and do all that. I sort of wrote down rook c8, or intended to play rook c8, and I raised my hand. I called the arbiter, and I did a 50 move rule claim. And I said, okay, this is 50 moves. So they go back and they tally up the moves. And let's remember that on move 56, black played king takes h5. Black played it. So that means on black's 56 plus 50th move, 106,
oh, that's why.
it would be 50 moves. So we fast forward to move 106. I made the move rook c8 on move 106. My opponent will play the move checkmate, but at the moment right now, 50 moves technically haven't been made, 49.5 have been made. So that's not a 50 move rule. That's a 49.5 move rule, and that doesn't exist. So the claim was refuted, was denied, and correctly so, of course, which meant that I just resigned on the spot. I had to. It was like one last-ditch thing where you just, arbiter, I'd like to claim a draw. Otherwise, I'd like to resign and take a hike. And that's exactly what I did. So I lost trying to defend and then claim a 50 move rule, and the game actually was 49.5 moves, but not 50. And this was basically the end of a 7.5, 8-hour game. And you go out like this to to a 49.5 move, attempted claim that just wasn't to be. And it almost felt like in the last couple moves, somehow I got lazy because I was looking at my score sheet and I saw the big circle next to 106. And I was like, okay, we're almost there. There's a couple more moves, let's just finish this off. And I actually got myself mated somehow in the last 4 moves of the game. And then I couldn't even get myself out of it with a claim. So kind of ridiculous, but shows that you can't really take your foot off the gas. I ended up losing this game, and I haven't really had this end game since. So I haven't had the chance to prove that I can last half a move longer. But I'm very excited for that chance. For now, this is definitely one of the losses in my chess career that stung the most, let's say. Felt the worst afterwards, of course. Was not in a good mood. Don't know who could be. But 49.5 moves. This was one of the worst that I would remember, because I did play it while I was a decent player, as an FM. And this one felt the worst. It wasn't like I was playing for prize money or first place or anything like that. But it was round 7. It was like almost an 8-hour game. It was against another Canadian who, definitely a rival. We played each other quite a lot over the years, growing up in the scene together. And nothing feels worse than that. It's like such a long game, and then a big fat 0 in the result column, which is, I could have had that result way earlier. I could have lost the game in 20 moves, but nope. I decided to go 106 and then lose. 106.5, I should say, or 105.5. I mean, that sounds like a radio station. That's embarrassing. So there you go. Those are 2 of my pretty bad losses, but this one especially stung the most, although it wasn't necessarily against like very strong player, like world-class player, and the guy crushes me in a very nice game. This was sort of a different type of loss. He's a strong player, but it was more funny how it turned out. It was 49.5 moves at the end. The first game, though, against Ganguly was that one was a very impressive game by my opponent, and kind of caught me off guard. So one of the nicest players out there, Ganguly, really nice guy, and just totally crushed me in that game. So these were a couple games that were fresh in my mind, even though they're actually played a while ago. 4 years ago for one of them, and 8 years ago for this one. I'm getting old. But yeah, those were some of the most memorable, maybe not for the best reasons, but I guess that's kind of the point of this class. So yeah, there you go. That's it.